Happy Thanksgiving. Um, I just went back and reviewed that chapter 8, and I couldn't remember where I was going after Oregon. That's because this has to be about Margaret for a while. As I was getting ready to leave Oregon, I put my car up for sale. And right around the corner come Huck and Margaret, uh, and they bought it. I think I sold it for like $50. Anyway, um, we kind of hit it right off, and they invited me to come meet their neighbors. They were having a barbecue or something. Uh, so I went around the corner, and after all this time and not knowing anybody, I suddenly knew about half a dozen really neat people, and we all became pretty good friends. At one point, one of the bigger fellows named Craig, him and I went backpacking. If you can picture me on a Honda 450 with a full backpack, and this Craig who had to go 250 pounds in his backpack, we took off on my bike, and we went and explored northeastern and north central Oregon, which was neat. I caught my first steelhead. Uh, my God, the meat was red. It was a huge sucker, and it's a good thing he ran upstream, or he'd have snapped my line in a heartbeat. But hell, that fed us 2 meals each. Anyway, Margaret, Huck was her boyfriend she was living with, and this kind of shows you where a guy better to be damn careful when he opens his mouth. Anyway, Huck had used not morphine, but opium, blue. Anyway, he wasn't an addict, but he was a user. And of course, we were into smoking weed and hash and stuff. Anyway, he was wanting to get high. So we went up to his room, and Margaret, his woman, was asleep, laying on the bed. And he walked in there and looked around a little, and then reached over and slapped the living shit out of her. She was dead asleep. That so blew me away, I just immediately turned around and left. And, she's asking, what the hell did he do that for? And he's saying, where did you put my whatever it was? And she said, I haven't touched it. It's right wherever you put it. But at that point, I left the building. I'd never seen that. And I don't believe in hitting a woman. Not there hasn't been a few I wouldn't have liked to. Anyway, there was a Rose Bowl parade there in Portland, Oregon. It's a big deal. And these are days later. I was on my motorcycle wanting to go for a ride around. So I stopped and went up to Huck's room to see if he was around. And he was gone, and she was there. I said, well, I was just going to see if he wanted to go for a ride. And I stopped and said, how about you? You want to go for a ride? And she said, okay. So we jumped on the bike, and we ran all over the place, and finally stopped for a cup of coffee. And as we're having that coffee, I said, I got to ask you, why do you stay with a guy that slapped you like that? She said, well, there's no place else to go. Damn me. It was joking, really, but I said, well, there's always my place. Hormones talking, I suppose. But I wasn't really even attracted to this girl. And she said, well, it's a little close to home, ain't it? So I thought she took the joke. And then she said, but I could dig it. Shit, by the time we got back home, we just decided, well, let's just pack up and move. So we moved in together across the river. That started a 2-year thing. I was headed out, so she was ready to join me, and I took her on a test run up in the Columbia Gorge. We were going to do some backpacking. We looked on a map, and it showed this lake on the top. Oh my God, the Washington side looks pretty easy, but the Oregon side is lush, green, and steep. And it turned out to be an advanced only trail. And I mean, every now and then you'd have to climb a bush or something and look out, and you'd see another blue ribbon tied to a tree, and that was the way you had to go. So we get to the top, and this damn lake is nothing but a mud hole surrounded by mud. And so we had to melt snow for water to even eat. And I remember at that point, I said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, I just want to get the hell out of here. And she showed me she had blisters on her feet. She didn't have good boots. So we looked on the map, found an easy way back. It was a moderate trail, but it was going downhill. So we took it and got back. And short time later, we went up to Eddie Bowers in Washington, and she matched me: sleeping bag, backpack, boots, clothes. So she basically had everything I had, and we took off. Now I got to tell you, my Honda had been giving me the shits. It's like it wouldn't hold a charge or something, and sometimes it just have a hell of a time starting it. So I had gone to a Honda dealer, which I hold in low opinion on as a rule, and they had sold me a 750 battery, and it didn't really fit in the 450's compartment. So I can remember at one point in the middle of Montana, I stopped and I pulled all the wires out of that headlight, and I went through every damn one of them. I couldn't find a thing wrong. And but we had something wrong, and it's kind of spooky. We didn't have a hell of a lot of money. So we went into Missoula, and we got a KOA campground, and I drove down to the Honda dealer there, and I told him my situation. He said, well, I'll tell you what, if you'll wait till closing, I'll take a look at it. So I hung around, and he does a little snooping, and he says, yeah, I knew that's probably what it was. It's a demagnetized rotor in the alternator. And he said that comes from taking a hard crash, which I'd had a few. And so it wasn't charging the battery. And he said, I got an old 450 out here in the junkyard that maybe I can pull there. If it's good, we'll pull it off and I'll get it to you. But he said, you're going to have to buy a new battery because that 750 battery's cracked, broke. And I said, okay. So my one good experience with a Honda motorcycle mechanic shop, he got me back on the road. And I know we went up through Glacier around, and we're looking for work by now. So I went to Missoula, and the copper mine, that Anaconda copper mine, was on strike. So we had guys with families that were washing dishes and stuff. There was no work in Missoula. But we heard about work at Big Sky. They were just building Big Sky there north of Yellowstone. It's a big ski resort. And so we took off and we went there. We got there on a 4-day holiday. Camped right up there on the Gallatin River. The Gallatin River. And finally we decided we didn't want to hang around for days. It was a 4-day weekend. So we went down into Bozeman. And she got a job right off working for a motel, and I got a job right off working for a plumber who was building one first of its kind, big, fancy trailer park, really. And I was running the trencher. We were burying all the cables and stuff. Anyway, I remember we found a place we could park out of town. It was a campground. I remember we got snowed in there for like 4 days once. It was that time of year, and that's when we decided we probably better move to town. And we looked in the paper, and there was this cabin for rent for $35 a month. It had electricity and it had gas, but it had an outhouse, and you got your water from a pipe sticking out of the side of the hill there between me and the landladies. And so we took it. Hell, $35 a month, that's pretty decent. So anyway, we're sitting there, and I'm realizing I've really made a big mistake here with this gal. And so I told her I was going to go back to California and spend Christmas with my folks. So we drove We drove to Salt Lake. They kind of put her on a bus headed for back to Portland or back to Salem's, where she was originally from. And I went on down to see the folks. That's like there's so many things to tell, but one of them being at this point we had this old 53 Buick. I mean, the front bumper of that thing probably weighs more than cars weigh now, but when I bought it, drive slipped. So the transmission was on its way out. But I found if you put it in low and zipped up and then put it in second and zipped up, by the time you get up to 35, it didn't slip in high. And it was a bomb. Anyway, I did something stupid. I had a buddy of mine had a 59 Ford. He was out there sliding around the damn side of the hillside, having fun in the snow. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that too. Well, I got high centered in the ditch trail, and pretty soon I wasn't even taking my foot off the gas to go from low to reverse to try to rock that thing out of there. Consequently, I burnt low and reverse out. So now I had a slipping drive, no reverse, and low that slipped. So second gear was anyway. That's what we took off from Bozeman in, I'm headed back to California, and going up the Gallatin Canyon. I swear to God, them truck drivers would come whooshing down there, and it would blind you. I mean, the snow, they'd blow the snow up over your windshield, and here you are. It's a pretty steep way down on the left side, and some mountain on the right if you were lucky, and you just have to hold your breath and slow down, let your foot off the gas till you could see again. Pretty spooky. So by the time we get to Yellowstone, West Yellowstone, it's night and it's cold, and decided, I'm going to put the chains on this sucker. Of course, every car in Montana had chains. So I put the chains on, and we got no more than half a mile out of town, and the car just rolled to a stop. It wouldn't pull chains. That's how bad that transmission was. So I walked back. I caught a guy right before he closed at his gas station there, and he come out and drug us into town and parked the car behind the gas station. And he said, I'll have to deal with it in the morning or weekend or whatever it was. So there we are. We didn't really have money for a motel room in West Yellowstone, so we were going to sleep in the car, and it was cold. I mean, we had goose down. We weren't hurting, but I got to thinking, I bet if I took them damn chains off there, it'd pull. So I went out and took the chains off, and sure enough, you could slowly start rolling, and then, I mean, anytime you stomped on the gas pedal, it'd just whine. It was that loose, but if you just tickled it along, it'd pick up speed. And like I say, from 35 on, you were good to go. I still had studded snow tires on this car, so we're headed out. And I think I'd already blown the flat tire or something. I was on a spare, no other tire. Anyway, I discovered, so I had it in my mind, if this thing has another flat, I'm just going to steer it out, go through the fence as far out into a field as I can and pull the plates and leave it. But I discovered I could, how it's called hydroplaning, but after you get going so fast, you just start doing a little bit of that as you're driving. And I discovered with that Buick, it really didn't matter how much faster than 55 you went. This didn't get any worse. So pretty soon I'm roaring down these roads at about 85 miles an hour with this Buick. And I started passing these cars, and there was like a Corvette Stingray. Let me think now, because there was a Chevy something or other, Ford station wagon, and one other one. And they all had street tires on. So when the road was dry, they're booking. Well, at dry road, I didn't dare go over about 50 with studded snow tires, or it made hell of a racket. So I'd have to creep along. And then when it got parts of that road, it'd be snow packed, I could pick it up and roar, and I'd be passing these guys. And it was kind of like an unofficial road race. And I can tell you the last the last one, that Corvette passed me just outside of St. George on the way to Reno, on the way to Las Vegas. So it was a pretty long road race, really, but we kept going back and forth and back and forth. That was kind of fun. Anyway, I'd sent Margaret off. I thought, all right, I get back home. I'm with the folks. And that was when I got that job roofing. And I think that was when I told Brother Steve if he graduated from high school, I'd take him on the road, although I'm not sure of that yet. Anyway, Margaret ended up coming down. And, of course, couldn't stay at Mom and Dad, so went and got a place in Duarte. And that's when I got a call from Uncle Marvin in South Dakota, asked if I'd come back and help him. He'd got a contract to wire the Indian housing they were building. So I said, all right. So now I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. So we go back to South Dakota and pick up all the rest of the stuff we had at the folks' house, and then all the way up California to Salem, and I dropped her off again. And then I went on to South Dakota, and that was I had like 4 sunburns in a row on top of my forehead there from riding that motorcycle that far. And once I got there, I decided I'm done with motorcycles. I mean, that's a lot of thousands of miles in a week. And I went and traded it for a car. And Uncle had me staying out on it was a shelled out old building that had been burned out, 2-story house, and out in the middle on the way to the projects. And he had a bunch of pigs out there, various sizes. I think he only had 2 of those big breeding sows. And then he had some feeders, and then he had some babies, and they were all kept separate. Well, he said, you can feed them for me, and he had a little camper out there. So now I'm 10 miles out of town in this camper with this new little Toyota Corolla, only new car I ever owned. And I get the lonelies again. So I talked to Margaret, and she's ready to come out. I'm ready to let her. It couldn't have been a month, and I realized I'd blew it again. And so I told her I was really sorry, but I was going to have to take her back. So that's about the last time I saw her, but I took her back. Steve Houck had a little Subaru back when they were really cheap little car, front wheel drive, one of the first, and we drove all the way back to Oregon, and I dropped her off again. Went back to South Dakota. And at that point, it was like 0 degrees and a 40-mile-an-hour wind, and it was time to leave. So I headed south, and I drove south and west with this cat I took along, which I shouldn't have. And finally at Jackson, Mississippi, it was 75 degrees at night, and I decided that was far enough I could stop. Hey! You too! What's the... Uh-oh. Anyway, I stopped and spent the night. I turned the cat loose, and it was gone. Boy, it had enough of me. Anyway, so now I'm down in... I decided to go on to Montgomery, Alabama, and stop there. I'm going to stop right now.